The following is footage from my Mod 2 mock test with my instructor and another new rider as we rode to the test centre for our Mod 1 tests. If you are looking for live footage from my actual Mod 2 test with an examiner, the link to that video can be found in the description. I'll be providing commentary over this to highlight any mistakes and what to avoid, also to provide general advice and tips to help you out for your test and what to do in certain scenarios you will commonly encounter on the roads and in your Mod 2 test.
In your Mod 2 you can't stop on...
You'll be asked to pull over at least once or twice during your test to show you can safely do so. The first one usually being at the start of your test within a few minutes. Simply check your mirrors, indicate left and do your shoulder check. Unless stated otherwise by the examiner, don't park on double or single yellows or in front of people's drive or H-bars. Use your common sense. Remember when pulling away to check your mirrors, to indicate right and to do your shoulder checks. It's not necessary to indicate if there is no vehicles. Remember at mini roundabouts, if you can't see any cars, just simply go straight through. On conditions like this, you're going to be in position 2 or in the central position of the road when there's no dangers. And you always want to make sure you meet in the middle of the danger. If there are parked cars, such as the one here, you want to do a quick shoulder check, or if there's any cars, you want to make sure that you're checking your mirrors and indicating it beforehand, and you do the same when you're turning back in the road. You want to frequently be checking your mirrors left and right as well, every often, as you can see here I'm doing. And again, approaching mini roundabouts, you always want to be looking up ahead. Check what other vehicles are doing, if they're going to go straight ahead or turn right. And don't always rely on their indicators, as causing a vehicle to suddenly stop or brake will cause you to fail. Just ignore what I was doing here when I was swerving. I was just getting some practice in for the avoidance. And around corners and bends, you always want to be looking as straight up as you can possibly. Always make sure that you maintain around a 2-second distance between any vehicles in front of you for safety reasons, so you can make sure that there's enough time to brake. So coming up to this turn here, be turning left, so we want to be in position 1, as you can see here. Position 1 is about half a meter or 1.5 feet from the curb. And pulling away, always make sure you remember to cancel your indicators, as not doing so can cause you to fail very easily, and it's incredibly dangerous, as you can get T-boned, for example, if you leave them on. Make sure you're paying attention always to changing speed limits, especially if you're unfamiliar to the area. We recently entered a 14-mile-an-hour limit here. And going in and off the roundabout, you're always making sure that you're doing necessary steps and normal procedures for that. If the roundabout approach is unmarked and there's no traffic, stick to the first lane. And if there is, it doesn't make a difference which lane you stick to. But remember, if you are either in one or the first or second lane, to stick to the correct procedure regarding doing your indications and your shoulder checks. You always want to make sure you are following the correct speed of traffic, but also that you're not exceeding the speed limit at the same time. Don't be too overly cautious, as you can get minors for this as well, and you do not want to rack up too much undue hesitation minors. Again, approaching another roundabout, you always want to be preparing well ahead and in advance when you do so. Some people do find that traffic does help them, but in my case, when it's clear, it's a bit better. If it's clear, don't hesitate and go. But again, don't be forced to suddenly head off or feel pressure to do so, as last thing you want is another car braking because of you. So I'm going to be going straight ahead here. I've checked over my left shoulders and I'm moving off. Coming into national speed limit here. This is a dual carriageway. So you want to be getting up to the correct speed, but doing so safely. Again, make sure you are maintaining that 2-second distance even at these speeds, especially at these speeds. So we're approaching another roundabout here. As you can see, it is unmarked.
Is that all cases when it's
I've already
unmarked?
spotted that I'm going to have to stop well ahead in advance. However, it is clear, so there's no time wasted, and we're heading off again. Doing my mirror check and straight in to the correct lane. Again, straight after getting up to speed, the correct speed again. And throughout all this, again, you're always checking your rear mirrors left and right to check if anything's changed and to show to the examiner that you're being observant.
Yeah, because like
In situations like this where you can see a max speed sign, they are only advisory and not actually legally enforceable. But again, use your own common sense and use the appropriate speed in tight corners and bends. Anytime you increase or decrease your speed, you always want to be checking your mirrors beforehand. A lot of people do seem to struggle to get up to speed, especially on national speed limit roads. So don't hesitate. If there's no reason why you can't, or if the weather's fine, for example, get up to the speed. But also use your common sense. If there's traffic, if there's fog, if it's raining heavily, for example, obviously adjust to that. Just so general situations, I said you want it to be 2 seconds. However, when it's raining, you want to double that to 4 seconds. And in extreme situations or weather conditions such as ice, very heavy rain, for example, that can be more than 10 seconds. And you do want to drop your speed as well. So as you can see, we are in the national speed limit again here. You should always be in the first lane if you are not overtaking. If you see a car doing, for example, 40 or 50, you should overtake, as you should not be relying on the speed of other cars or relying on they're doing it correctly. You need to use your own intuition. And once you get to that speed and nothing has changed, don't become complacent and continue to do all your normal observations. Don't let overtaking cars or people speeding put you off. Just stick to what you know and what you know you should be doing, and you'll be okay. You only need to do a quick glance at your speed to make sure you're still doing it correctly and it's not increasing or dropping off. There is very minor tolerance, so don't worry about being 1 or 2 under or 1 or 2 over. That's okay. A lot of people seem to panic over that if they do it. Don't let that bother you. There's obviously tolerances with them. Again, it's usually dual carriageways and roads like this where people do seem to struggle to make the speed just because simply they're not used to it. But yeah, make sure you do follow it, and don't automatically assume it is national speed limit. For example, here it's 70. Don't assume that. Keep an eye out for change in speed limits and the repeater signs that will follow. I've got a very useful video in my top 10 FAQ and questions and answers video for the mod 2, so have a look at that if you're having problems with speed limit and understanding them and everything involved with that. Use all the road signs to your advantage here. It's very clear you're going to have to be braking here in advance from the markers and slowing down much earlier in advance due to traffic as well. Even here you want to be looking up and making sure you're in the correct lane that you're going to be heading off in. This is especially important during your independent ride part of the test. Here we're sticking to the central position, middle of the lane, which you want to be doing in most situations, especially in a dedicated lane, such as ahead or straight only. Again, see if you can spot the national speed limit repeater signs. They're not always placed that frequently, so you always need to pay attention to them to make sure you're not going too slow or too fast. It's worth mentioning, if you have any difficulty in understanding what the examiner is saying, or you can't hear him, or you've lost communication, just shake your head and they will try and repeat what they said. However, if you've completely lost communication, pull over to do so when safe, and you won't be penalized for anything like that. In the same sense, if you accidentally take the wrong junction or the wrong lane in a roundabout, it's fine to do that as long as you don't create any more danger or any danger to other vehicles by trying to correct yourself in a dangerous way. Just take the wrong turn and you can correct yourself after safely. And when you're in the second lane, or overtaking lane as it's most commonly known, after you've done so, always make sure you drop back in to the first lane to not impede any overtaking traffic. But again, if the cars on the first lane or any other vehicles are doing substantially less than the specified speed limit on the road, and it's safe to ride at the speed limit, then you want to make sure that's what you're doing. And if that means overtaking other cars, don't be hesitant to do that. So when you come to a stop, again, you want to be making sure that you keep that 2 bikes length distance away. Examiners really do pay attention to this, and it is quite a common failing point for people to constantly come up too close. Pulling away, always do your shoulder check. Don't have to on both sides, just on your right side. So that's obviously because we drive on the right, we drive on the left. So you can see we are staying in our lane here, and as soon as we get past that junction, we're not turning off in. Do our shoulder checks just after the junction. And as you change lanes or doing an overtake, you're always doing your shoulder checks and your lifesavers. And as soon as you're done, you're doing the reverse. You're looking left and turning back in, and continuing to make normal progress. The test will last normally no more than around 30-35 minutes. So even if you were to get stuck in severe traffic, that's not a problem. Just stick to what you know and don't let that concern you. If it does pass that, you will just head back to the test center, and if you have not made any serious dangerous riding faults or not too many minors, you will still pass your test. Also, make sure you've adjusted your mirrors beforehand, as it's a bit of a nightmare to do. You don't want to be doing that when you're riding, as you saw there. Again, don't hesitate pulling away when you can see it's clear. You don't want to tot up too much undue hesitation, minus for that. Here, doing your shoulder check left. As you pass the junction, the exit before where you want to turn. Make sure you don't get caught out from other vehicles pulling out, and you're always keeping a good distance. That's why you always want to take roundabouts very cautiously, as even if it was no fault of your own, you can easily find yourself in a bad situation or failing because some idiot has pulled out quickly in front of you. I do find rural riding a bit more simple than urban riding, simply based on the fact of there's less cars on the road, and the fact that you do get nice country roads like this, especially if it's national speed limit. Should be a nice ride out. You always want to make sure you're looking as ahead as possible. Don't look down too much, just a quick glance to check your speed every now and then, but you should already start to get a feel at what you're doing. And as I said, you don't need to worry about doing it to the exact mark, as there is minor tolerances there. Here I'm not checking my mirrors as much as you should be, but make sure you drill that into your head that you want to be doing that every 10-15 seconds to see if anything is changed and you're always aware of what's going around you and your surroundings. Always take bends and corners more cautiously. Don't feel like you need to stick to the speed limit, and drop your speed as appropriate. But again, once you come out and it's nice and open, road conditions are good, don't fail to make your speed. So you always want to get up to that and stay to that. And again, it's important to note that common sense in the Mod 2 goes a long way. It's hard to predict everything and every single thing that you will encounter, so it's good to apply your knowledge as effectively as possible. So here we were approaching a 30, as you can see. In advance, I checked my left and right mirror as I was dropping my speed, as you should be doing. And it's a priority junction here to opposite vehicles. There's plenty of time, so don't hesitate to make your way through if you find yourself in there. But remember in priorities that it can also be the other way. So make sure you know if it's your priority or the opposite road. Again, in nice open roundabouts, just slow down and continue. There's absolutely no need to stop. And coming back into national speed limit, so as you can see, in rural areas it's quite common to go straight from a 30 back into a national speed limit here. And because this is a single carriageway, due to the fact there is no central reservation, i.e. a physical barrier or strip of land in between the road, which means your speed should be 60. Again, if you're all confused by that, please check the video in the description. It's a very comprehensive guide going through everything you'll ever need to know about speed limits in your Mod 2 and in general as well. And if it was a dual carriageway, you would be doing 70, as you saw before in the earlier parts. In here you can clearly see we're dropping to a 40, so checking both mirrors before you do so. And there should be repeater signs which you can see along the way to further confirm that if for whatever reason you missed it. And here you saw we are dropping to a 30 now. For 30 zones, 30 speed limits areas, you won't be able to see repeater signs, as you use the principle of regular street lighting to show that the speed limit is 30. Make sure you don't get caught speeding during your test as well, as that would be a bad double whammy. Here I was already checking in advance to see if that bus was pulling away, but it was just as hazards, so make sure you do know the difference. It can be quite confusing at times, but if you're unsure, just always drop your speed. It's always better to get a minor than to get a serious or a dangerous riding fault. Here, another example of a mini roundabout where you should just go straight through. If it's slightly larger, you do want to make sure that you're following basic principles for observations at roundabouts. And make sure whatever you do, do not ride over the circle in the middle. Even if it is painted and you can just go straight through it, make sure you do not do that or you will fail. Always make sure you're looking up ahead to see if any vehicles are braking, so you can be warned in advance. You do not want to be slamming your brakes last minute. All-rounded observations is important, and examiners are looking to see that you can show that. There is a lot of multitasking involved, but a lot of stuff does become second nature to you, which allows you to improve on things that you're not as good at doing. Again, always when you're moving in and out significantly, you want to be doing your shoulder checks. When you're moving in, obviously left, and moving out, obviously right. So here I'm moving in, quick check of the mirrors. So you will want to be using road markings as well as road signs to your advantage. So you can see, for example, there the road merges. You'll be aware of that well in advance, so nothing will catch you out by surprise. Corners here, again, you want to be dropping your speed, and your visibility up ahead is reduced. So all these combinations you want to take into consideration. In case you didn't know the difference between your keep clear boxes and your yellow box junctions, difference is that yellow box is enforceable and keep clear is recommended or more advisory and courteous to follow. In your tests, however, I recommend that you do actually stay clear of them for both. Here stopped again, clearly showing that I'm maintaining that distance of at least 2 bikes. I know in everyday riding or every day on the road, this is obviously never the case, but in your test you want to show that you're maintaining that distance, because it's a habit that a lot of people have and it's quite hard to break, especially if you've had your CBT for quite a while.
Yeah, there we go. You can just read these with mine after doing it for so long.
Like I said, a lot of the things you do should become second nature. So moving out, you never just move out without doing your observations, which I said leaves you on to be able to concentrate on what's actually happening on the road itself and up ahead. That's why it's equally important to check your mirrors quite often to see if anything behind you or the situation has changed as well. This is the case when you've stopped, not just when you're riding. Don't be afraid to deviate from your normal riding position in cases where, for example, the road is bumpy or there's potholes. You can always do that. Here, approaching the roundabout, you can see we're entering another national speed limit road here. Obviously, you don't want to make it up to that speed yet because it's not safe to do so, and we're coming off right here. But as the road opens and straightens up, you want to keep that in mind and gently open the throttle, making up the speed if it's safe to do so. Again, you can see all the road signs here showing the bends and twists and sharp corners in the road, and additional road markings such as slow. Use that to your advantage. Here, quickly, the national speed limit has dropped and it's now 50. So it's not dropped, it's now a 50 and it's no longer national speed. You can see a sign where it's warning you of schools, so you want to pay extra attention, especially during those hours. Remember, going round bends left or right, you're not going to be sticking precisely to position 2, the central position, and you want to adjust accordingly to maximize how much you can see ahead of you. For example, going left, you want to move slightly out. If the road's turning left, you want to move slightly out so you can see more, and vice versa. If the road's bending right, you want to move a bit in. This not only shows you maximum distance, but also is a more safer way to ride. So there's another repeater sign you saw here. So 50. If you've already seen these by now, that's great. It shows that you're obviously able to focus on that as well. It's all able to take in all the information possible at one go, while seeing how the current conditions on the road and other vehicles changes as well. So on a road, if the lines are separated on your side, on the left, and it's a solid white right next to it, that means you can overtake. However, if it's a solid white and dashed on the right hand bit of it, it means that cars on the opposite side can overtake. So just bear that in mind. And we have dropped to a 30 here. Again, once you enter 30, you will only see one speed limit sign showing 30, and the rest of it will be confirmed by regular street lighting. Always make sure you're not just following the car or any other vehicle ahead of you, as that's another common failing point for people to mess up on, as a car in front can either be going too slow, too fast, or just generally riding dangerously. You want to be sticking to what you know and what you've been taught. So here you can see the double whites, which means either side of the road can't overtake. On these narrow lanes anyway, you don't want to be thinking about that. For example, if the car in front is doing 40 in a 50, you really don't want to overtake anyway, because you can only overtake under the speed at or under the speed limit. So you can't overtake at around 80 to get back in quickly. You can only take up to the speed limit, overtake up to the speed limit. So it's only advisable, in my opinion, to overtake on a dual carriageway when there's 2 lanes. It can either be on a single or dual carriageway, just as long as there's 2 lanes, so you can overtake without having to cross in the opposite lane of traffic. Unless obviously the road's quite open and it is quite easy and safe to do so. However, don't feel pressurized to overtake if it is not safe, yet the car or the other vehicle in front of you is going too slow. You might encounter a situation, for example, a tractor in front, and there's a special rule where if they do have amber lights and they are traveling, I believe at 10 miles an hour or less, you can actually overtake through solid white lines. But again, that's a situation you're unlikely to encounter unless it's quite a rural location. But just have that in mind. Always notice how early on I'm braking when I can see that the exit to roundabout is not clear or there's people queuing up to pass. But when it does go so, when it is clear, I'm always looking. I'm not looking at my exit, I'm looking at the opposite side to see what vehicles may enter or what their intentions are. And I'm not relying on their indicators as previously mentioned. Here moving in, as I said, you always do your shoulder check. It's not always necessary to mirror indicate if there's no other vehicles, but there's no harm in doing so at all. The number one importance is always doing your shoulder check, because that way you can't miss anything. And as I do mine, I'm simultaneously straight before checking my mirrors.
Oh, that is... I should have gone this because
Here I was slightly hesitant as I wasn't 100% sure. If you're not 100% sure, don't feel pressurized just to go straight through, as that can be an instant fail. If the driver, for example, decides to change his mind.
Yeah. I thought the other one was hesitating, then I looked up and saw it. Yep. Nope.
Make sure if you're asked to pull up, don't put your feet on the pavement. Make sure you keep it on the carriageway. As you saw, that was incorrectly done. But from what test purposes, that's fine. But yeah, in the actual test conditions, make sure your feet remain on the road itself. And you'll be fine there. And always the same procedures pulling away. Don't get confused with speed limits on the side of the roads. For example, a lot of these minor roads heading off from the major road here are 20, but we're sticking to 30. I know this can throw a lot of people off, and sometimes the speed limit signs get twisted in the sense that it's facing you and it can confuse you. But that's why it's always helpful to have local knowledge of the road, and always try and pick a test center close by where you've not necessarily drove or ridden in, but you're aware of and you're familiar with roundabouts, speed limits, junctions, and other hazards you're likely to come across. Here's a good example to show where you may have gone ahead because the bus was going slow. However, it would actually start to creep past the stop line for the mini roundabout. So again, you wanted to make sure you wait until they go, even if a car is going quite slowly, as once they have entered the roundabout, it's their priority on the right. Everyone on the left, you've got priority against them. As you can see now why roundabouts and junctions are one of the highest, most concentrated area as a failing point for the test. It's usually other vehicles and road users that are going to be causing you any problems. So that's really what you want to be paying attention to in these scenarios. In built up areas and in traffic, again, I've mentioned it, but it's tempting to stray quite close to other cars or bikes, but make sure you do keep that distance. I remember it took me a while to remember to constantly do this, but it has to be drilled into you. As you can fail on totting up, which is getting too many minors for doing the same thing. So you want to make sure that's completely avoided, as it's something you can easily fix. When you're coming or approaching crossings, traffic lights, such as Pelican, Toucan, for example, don't slam your brakes if you're crossing and it's on amber. Just pass straight through. Obviously, it goes on amber and you've got time, then obviously gently brake. But it's more important that you consider who's behind you, as slamming your brakes can equally be more dangerous. Here's an example where we're turning right into a dedicated lane. You can choose to stick to central position, or you can be in position 3. Either way is fine, because in all dedicated lanes you can stick to central position. However, in the left or straight ahead only lane, you want to be sticking to whatever position where you're heading to, so other road users know.
Definitely. It's just in a split second you fail it.
With roads where there's no clear road markings, you always want to be meeting in the middle of the danger. And here we approached a 20, so you want to bear that in mind as well. I believe here we just stopped off for fuel, so carrying on with the ride here. Always sticking to position 2 in normal riding conditions. You can use bus lanes if necessary, depending on where you are. Obviously in London, most of them are available for bikes. That's another thing to note. However, you can also just stick to using the normal road. And here you can enjoy some nice and a fresh resurfaced road. What a rarity these days, right? And we're almost there right now. It's a good time to mention that it's important not to get complacent when you're almost done. Entering a 40, although again, roads like this, it does look more like national speed limit, but don't let that put you off. That's why you always got to be observant. You can't always rely on your intuition, especially with speed limits. Use advanced roundabout signs as well to your advantage, so you can slow down in time. Here we're turning right and we're in position 2 in that lane. If your exit is further past 12 o'clock position, you want to obviously be in the outer lane, which makes more sense. So mirror indicate a shoulder check, turn in here, and we have arrived. So I hope you have found this video quite helpful. I've got a whole other range of Mod 1 and Mod 2 guides and videos, including footage from my live test with commentary again. Here I am parking for my Mod 1. You want to have it facing out ideally, as your test starts and stops the minute you get on and off your bike. So it's another thing to make sure, or to do, that you can make sure that's easier for yourself. Again, if this has helped you, let me know. If you have any other questions or queries, put it in the comments and I'll have a go at answering it. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next video.